Welcome to New Wave Global, ladies and gentlemen. I am Asad Butt. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm bringing to you a special episode, like a transmission on what's happening in South Asia right now. I have uh, uh, I have a very special guest. I have somebody who's done uh, diplomacy at the highest level for Pakistan, representing Pakistan at the United Nations. He remained permanent representative of Pakistan to the UN, also remained president of the UN Security Council, has a keen eye on what's happening in South Asia right now. We're doing like a series of conversations at New Wave Global, covering what's happening in India, what's happening in Pakistan, and what is the current state of affairs in the region. But let me first welcome Munir Akram Saab, who's joining us from New York. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for joining, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, Asad. Very kind of you.
Sir, I'd like to have your opening remarks generally on what's your take on what's happening in South Asia right now and what led to the present crisis. Why have matters escalated to this point?
Well, you know, the situation in occupied Jammu and Kashmir is well known. India has intensified its oppression in Jammu and Kashmir, especially after 5 August 2019, when India abrogated its Article 370, terminated the autonomy or so-called autonomy that was at least legally available to the state of Jammu and Kashmir under its constitution, took over and declared it a union territory, divided it between Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir, in inducted several hundred thousand more troops in there, so that there are 900,000 troops, Indian troops in Jammu, occupied Jammu and Kashmir. As you know, there was a big blockade. All political leaders were incarcerated. Information has been blocked from Jammu and Kashmir. And the effort of the Modi government has been to say that things have returned to normal in Jammu and Kashmir. This is certainly not the case because there is widespread alienation of the population of Jammu and Kashmir and the suppression of any people, occupation and suppression of any people produces a reaction from the people. And in Kashmir, there has been, for several years now, an ongoing resistance movement. It is an indigenous resistance movement, and it is bound to express itself in several ways. And therefore, there have continued to be incidents in Jammu and Kashmir, while at the same time, the Indian repression has also continued. India's failure to control Jammu and Kashmir has led it to blame Pakistan for every incident that takes place there. Although Pakistan has given assurances and has refrained from intervening in the situation in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but nevertheless, in order to explain its failure to control Jammu and Kashmir, in order to justify its narrative that everything is normal except that Pakistan is interfering, India has always resorted to blaming Pakistan, for instance. In many cases, in order to mobilize domestic public opinion in India, which is anti-Muslim, and the BJP's support base is Hindutva, anti-Muslim, India has, in our view, resorted to several false flag operations where actions have been taken of terrorist violence only in order to blame Pakistan and to blame the Muslims. And this is the case again in this Pahalgam incident where, in my view, it is clearly a false flag operation, and it is being used, A, to generate and mobilize domestic opinion for the BJP, which is going to face some elections in some other provinces. And secondly, and more importantly, to exert pressure on Pakistan in order to secure our submission to Indian domination and the Indian narrative, and moreover, to utilize this incident as a means in order to suspend the Indus Waters Treaty, which India wants to modify, to change, in order to secure more access to the waters of the Indus than was provided in the Indus Waters Treaty. So these are, I think, the motivations behind this incident and its use by the Indian government for its own national, domestic, as well as external strategic objectives.
Sir, how do you see the relative successes of the two? You've been in Pakistan's foreign service for a very long time. So, how do you evaluate the relative successes of the Indian foreign service, who've been kind of to some degree of success, been able to assert not perhaps this time, but when Pathankot happened, when Pulwama happened, when Uri happened, that Pakistan is the aggressor in this case, and Pakistan, which is the Indian narrative, is a terrorist state. While Pakistan has been talking about these false flag operations since the time Pathankot happened, which a lot of people think was a tipping point in the relations because Prime Minister Modi had visited Pakistan right before Pathankot. So uh, people were thinking that they're positive sort of diplomatic gestures from both sides. But then Pathankot happened and a series of then events, which Pakistan terms false flag operations. India believes that, these are attacks done by Pakistani proxies in Kashmir. But how do you evaluate? Because there are narratives on both sides. How do you evaluate the relative successes of diplomats on both sides or the ministries of foreign and external affairs?
I think Pakistani diplomacy is second to none. We have excellent diplomats, and our diplomacy has been very correct and very forceful. Of course, you must see the difference in the relative power of the two countries.
Right.
India is 6 or 7 times Pakistan's size. It has resources. There are a lot of countries which want to access the Indian market. The United States wants to use India as a counter to the rise of China and therefore has established a partnership with India and has therefore been supportive of the Indian narrative in many cases.
Mm.
So one factor in what you call the success of Indian diplomacy, I believe that their diplomacy has not succeeded because the case on Kashmir has not changed. That the legal position of the international community, of the Security Council, of the United Nations
Mm.
on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir remains what it was. And if you recall, the statement that was made on the 8th of August of 2019, soon after the revocation of Article 370 by India, the Secretary General stated very clearly that the Kashmir issue should be resolved in accordance with the UN Charter, UN resolutions, and bilateral agreements. And that position remains also the legal position, and it remains the position of Pakistan. And therefore, internationally, India's position has not been accepted by the international community. And given the relative asymmetry in power between the two countries, I think that is a major accomplishment of the Pakistan diplomacy, that our stance on Kashmir continues to be validated at the international level. It has not been compromised. legally speaking. Nor is there any support for any action by India to take over the rest of Jammu and Kashmir, as they have been threatening as such. So I think the Pakistan foreign policy has been successful. Of course, India tries to use every occasion, every opportunity to exert pressure on Pakistan in order to compromise our position on Jammu and Kashmir. But, Pakistan has held firm. We continue to support the right of self-determination for the Kashmiris. We continue to call for the implementation of the UN Security Council resolutions. And India has not been able to either coerce us or to actually do anything in order to compromise the position on Jammu and Kashmir. It remains what it has been since 1947, the call for implementation of a plebiscite in order to enable the Kashmiri people to determine their own future. So these kind of pressure tactics, exertion, coercion, even kinetic action against Pakistan, this can be expected of India, but we have to resist it. And we have, I believe, we have the means, both militarily and diplomatically, to be able to resist such pressure from India.
Uh, Right. But sir, of course, you mentioned the abrogation of Article 370. So, which was, of course, a unilateral action. And I understand that you point to the fact that it wasn't none of whatever happens in Kashmir or what India aspires to do is supported or ratified by the international community. So, as far as, the international diplomacy goes, there is absolutely Kashmir is what the status quo Kashmir was in the past. But one thing that has, of course, meaningfully changed is the abrogation of Article 370, a unilateral action from India, which the Pakistanis feared was a step towards changing or altering the demographics of the region. And you talked about, suppression or perhaps the human rights violations ticking up in Kashmir. Do you think that India, over the past 5 years since 2019, has meaningfully altered demographics in Kashmir, and that is why, such events have become more frequent?
Well, I think India is attempting to change the demography of Jammu and Kashmir. It's been a long-standing BJP objective. Both abrogation of Article 370 and the change in demography in occupied Jammu and Kashmir has been a declared intention of the BJP. They have proceeded and they have issued 3 or 4 million residency permits to outsiders to settle in Jammu and Kashmir, and therefore this is a campaign. It is, however, Pakistan does not recognize the changes which the Indians have made in Jammu and Kashmir. The Security Council, in two specific resolutions, Resolution 91, as well as Resolution 121 of the Security Council, both have stated very categorically that any unilateral actions that are taken by either party to change the arrangements in Jammu and Kashmir, that such unilateral actions would not be considered as the final disposition of the status of Jammu and Kashmir, which requires the holding of a plebiscite. So in international law, India's constitutional provisions, Article 370 and 35A, were not recognized. The parliament, the constituent assembly that was set up by the Indians in Jammu and Kashmir, that was not recognized. And therefore, any other changes that have been made since then by India unilaterally are not recognized under the resolutions of the Security Council, and they are legally under international law, they are null and void as such. So Pakistan and the international community does not recognize the unilateral changes that India has made. Now, of course, India is trying to create facts on the ground by inducting outsiders as such. And this is obviously something that is rejected by Pakistan. But more importantly, it is rejected by the people of Jammu and Kashmir, the people in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And India is facing difficulties in inducting such outsiders. Most of them are, by the way, military people, military personnel and military families, and they are there as an occupation force. And these are obviously not accepted by the Kashmiri people. So if and whenever there is a plebiscite, people who have been inducted from outside in Jammu and Kashmir would not, under international law, be authorized to be a part of the determination of the future of Jammu and Kashmir.
Sir, one argument, and I'm just digressing a bit now. Thank you so much for a very comprehensive answer. Um, One argument that the Indian, and I'm playing the devil's advocate with you now, one argument that our Indian friends give us is that Pakistan supported the Mujahideen when they were fighting the USSR in the 1980s, and and Pakistan's role in the war on terror post 9/11. Uh, Pakistan has been saying that we are the greatest victim of terrorism, but the Indians keep telling the world and keep telling us and arguing with us that no, you harbored terrorism in the region and you supported the Mujahideen, and now they're coming back to bite you, or they came back to bite you after 9/11. But you created these terrorists in the region, and the Pakistan army supported it. And now India keeps using that imagery to sort of assert to the world that whatever is happening in Kashmir or perhaps in India is also orchestrated by Pakistan. How do you respond to that argument from the Indians?
Well, I think the Indians are sort of mixing up apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Uh, First of all, as far as the support to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan was concerned, it was supported by almost the entire Western world, almost the entire Muslim world, and several other countries, except those countries which were allied with the Soviet Union at that time, which was India in particular, and some other allies of the Soviet Union. Soviet occupation of Afghanistan was illegal, and that illegal occupation was opposed by the Afghans themselves, and Pakistan, in accordance with international law, which provides that foreign occupation is illegal and that there is a legitimate right to resist foreign occupation, and the freedom fighters have a right to receive support from whatever quota they can. It was under that international law that Pakistan supported the Mujahideen struggle against uh, against the Soviet occupation as such. Now, of course, that that struggle against the Soviet Union created the Mujahideen, created many groups which were extremist in their point of view, in their ideology, and yes, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States and other countries walked away and left these mujahideen and the extremist ideologies in place in Afghanistan and on the border with Pakistan. And that has infected, and that did infect our society negatively as such. As far as Kashmir is concerned, in Kashmir, the resistance was peaceful until December of 1989. The Soviets left in 1988. Uh, and then in 1989, December, the Indians held a fake election. Kashmiris protested against that election. And on December 20th, if I'm not mistaken with that date, December 20th, 1989, Indian forces in Srinagar killed 100 peaceful protesters. It was at that time that the Kashmiri struggle transformed from a peaceful struggle into an armed struggle.
Yes.
And that struggle, in our view, was a legitimate struggle. It was a struggle for freedom, for liberation from foreign occupation and from suppression. And under international law, it was a legal struggle. And on the same principle on which we had supported the liberation of Afghanistan, it was on the same principle that we supported the liberation struggle in Jammu and Kashmir. And there was not one or two organizations, there were hundreds of organizations, mostly indigenous Kashmiris, who took up arms against India. And yes, Pakistan did support them at that time as such. But then the struggle petered out. Some of the freedom fighters who Pakistan then resisted from supporting further because they had undertaken some terrorist actions, Pakistan stopped supporting those organizations and they turned on us. They turned on Pakistan. It's not a question of coming to bite you back. That bite back came because we stopped supporting the struggle in occupied Jammu and Kashmir in order to avoid a war with India. And it was only then that those organizations, the LET and the JEM, then turned on Pakistan and started, there was three attempts at assassination of President Musharraf at that time. So we paid the price for restraint against India. If we had continued support to those organizations, there would not have been this so-called came back to bite you issue. They came back to bite you because of our restraint towards India. And then, of course, because we resisted, they went rogue. They went on their own in order to conduct the operations that they could conduct against India, despite Pakistan's restraints on them. And therefore, all the incidents that took place, Uri, Pathankot, the Bombay incident, these were done by organizations in order to disrupt Pakistan's policy of trying to build good relations with India. And these were rogue operations. And we have put a stop. We declared them as terrorist organizations. And we agreed to list them on the Security Council's list of terrorist organizations, JUM, LET. All the principal leaders of these organizations are in jails in Pakistan under restraint. And they have morphed. Yes, there are some charities which may be associated with some of the personnel from those organizations, but these are charities. We do not allow any organization in Pakistan to conduct terrorist operations against other countries, especially, and the cross-border actions we have completely stopped. There is the UNMOGIP observers. We've invited several times. We've said to India, okay, if you are accusing us, allow an impartial observation.
Right.
Allow the monitoring of the line of control by the UNMOGIP, which is already present there observing the ceasefire, strengthen UNMOGIP, put in more observers, and police the line of control to establish And we would be glad to establish that Pakistan is not providing any cross-border support. This is an indigenous Kashmiri struggle. The Indians are unable to cope with it. And like all previous colonial powers, they argue that this liberation struggle is a terrorist struggle and therefore must be delegitimized and so forth. This is the Indian narrative. Pakistan has taken its hands off. If we were supporting the Kashmiri struggle, the situation would be much more serious for the Indians inside Jammu and Kashmir.
Sir, I'd keep playing the devil's advocate. Sorry for that.
Please go ahead.
And um, I'm a man who loves controversial things, so I'd keep raising them.
Yeah.
um, so India uses the same arc of the argument and says that you're doing the same in Balochistan. You call them terrorists, but it's a liberation struggle. And Pakistan sort of meets out the same kind of treatment to the BLA. What's your take on that, sir?
Well, first of all, the legal difference.
Yes.
Jammu and Kashmir is a disputed territory. It is recognized by the international community as disputed territory, and therefore India's presence is illegal there. Its occupation, its 900,000 troops there are a foreign occupation army. Balochistan is recognized as an integral part of sovereign Pakistan.
Hmm.
It is part of Pakistan's territory. It is part of our internal issue. So Balochistan and whatever happens in Balochistan is an internal issue of Pakistan. Secondly, fact of the matter is that the Indians have been supporting the Baloch insurgents at least for the last 30 years or so. And in their mind, this was in response to Pakistan's support to the Kashmiri liberation struggle.
Hmm.
So there is a legal difference in the two situations. Indian support to the BLA is open and well known.
Hmm.
They are financing all the leadership. They are financing, providing arms, operational support, etc., to all the BLA insurgents. And therefore, the Indian support to the BLA and to the Baloch insurgents is a crass intervention in the internal affairs of a sovereign country, and therefore distinguished from the Kashmiri struggle against foreign occupation. This is legal and political differences. The Baloch struggle would be extinguished tomorrow if Indian support to the insurgents and the safe havens which India has arranged for them were to be obliterated. But the Balochi struggle would be extinguished overnight. Pakistan, I mean, at the most, there are a few hundred Baloch insurgents. Pakistan will control it, and Pakistan is confident of controlling it. And nobody can break Pakistan like they broke East Pakistan from us. And this will not happen. And not in Balochistan, frontier, Sindh, anywhere that the Indians are aspiring to diminish Pakistan once again. It will not happen. We have the strength, we have the capability, and we have the means to correct the situation. Now, of course, mistakes in policies do happen. They aggravate situations. We are not saying we're immune to making some mistakes, but those mistakes can be corrected. These are our people, our own people, and eventually we will find the political means of ensuring that that the rights of all Pakistanis, whether they are Baloch or Pashtun or in the frontier or in Sindh or in Punjab, that the rights are respected, that hopefully will uh, will be the basis on which we will resolve our own problem.
I just have last two more questions to ask you, sir. Sorry, I've taken a lot of your time already, and thank you for taking time to do this. But um, on the point of India proxying in Balochistan, but Pakistan not perhaps doing the same in Kashmir, I think if I um, caught the spirit of your conversation right. But I'm, disclosing my positionality. I do international finance for a living, and I think of FATF and international financial sort of channels through which money or support could be transferred. And then with also physically, borders are increasingly non-porous now, as you also pointed out, that there is a lot of surveillance by UN MOGIP across the LOC as well. Why do you think that in the present FATF regulated regime, it's easy for India to sort of support monetarily the BLA struggle in Balochistan, but not so much for Pakistan in the case of Kashmir, or perhaps even recruiting people in Balochistan is easy for India. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, there are several reasons for that. First of all, India has got support from some external powers, some other powers. India is not scrutinized by the FATF in the same way that Pakistan has been.
Right.
And by the way, Pakistan has fulfilled all the requirements of the FATF,
Yeah.
which I think in some ways were quite excessive in trying to track not only terrorists, but their families, their sons, their grandsons, their wives, ex-wives, and so forth.
Yeah.
I think they went a little overboard, but we complied with everything and we got out of the gray list and so on. Indians have not been scrutinized. And that is a political issue. And that is why one of the factors why we had objections to FATF, because it's unequal. They have not put the Indians under the microscope like they have in Pakistan, and they should. And if they do, they will find how money is going to TTP, to BLA, and what the channels are. And we know the channel.
Hmm.
We know where the money is coming from, how it's financed. I think in yesterday's press conference, our DGISPR played a recorded conversation of an Indian agent negotiating the payment to terrorists in Pakistan.
Okay.
Please listen to that.
Okay.
It shows how consistently and comprehensively India is financing terrorists in Balochistan, in the frontier, from Afghanistan. The TTP is being financed by them. The BLA and other Baluch insurgents are being financed by them, given safe havens, provided intelligence cover. It's a comprehensive hybrid war that India is waging against Pakistan. India, with the support of certain other countries, I must add,
Hmm.
those countries which do not want the implementation of the China-Pakistan corridor, which do not want to see Gwadar emerge as a major transshipment port in the region, all of those countries, in my view, are involved in the financing and sponsorship of terrorism against Pakistan and China.
Right. Sir, on the Indus Water Treaty, you said that Article 370 was abrogated unilaterally by India. And some people in Pakistan now fear that the Indus Water Treaty could also become a victim of similar kind of unilateralism from India. And while Pakistan would keep protesting, India would sort of get away with it. Do you think getting away with sort of what they call abeyance of the Indo-Water Treaty? I heard some of their journalists yesterday say that we've not suspended it, but we've put it in abeyance. I don't know what's the legal difference, um, but do you think India would get away easily with this one too?
Well, there's several factors here. First of all, under the treaty, there is no clause for unilateral suspension or abrogation of the treaty.
Yeah.
There is no clause in that.
Or abeyance, or putting it in abeyance.
Abeyance means suspension, if you will. It's
Right.
twisting words, but
Yeah.
means same thing. So there is no provision to do that.
Right.
And therefore, any action that is taken which is contrary to the treaty um, unilaterally, any unilateral action is ipso facto a violation of the treaty as such. So legally, I think they would violate the treaty if they suspend it, keep it in abeyance, etc. That's the legal side, and we would have legal recourse and so on. Secondly, we have to judge what they can do if they suspend, abrogate, or violate the treaty. I think that the most immediate action or inaction they could take is to stop providing us information on the flow of the rivers,
Hmm.
which could complicate our ability to control the rivers, to regulate water to the farmlands and to our agriculture. I mean, that could be the most immediate thing. Secondly, they could block the waters from not only from the three rivers over which they have rights under the treaty, they could try to block the other three rivers upstream. And obviously, they do not have the capacity to do so at the moment. They could build that capacity. But then the question would be what they would do with the water, because it would cause flooding in parts that they control. So there would be a kind of profit and loss situation for them that they would have to assess if they block the rivers. But lastly, you have to see that if there is a major impact on Pakistan, uh, this would be amount to the strangulation of Pakistan,
Hmm.
culture and so forth. And when a country is strangulated in that way, whether by cutting off the rivers or strangulated in a blockade, for example, if our ports are blockaded, then it has to react. And if the Indians would carefully read the informal nuclear doctrine which Pakistan has issued, they would realize that one of the three situations in which we will use nuclear weapons is a blockade of our rivers and a blockade of Pakistan.
And Pakistan doesn't have a no first use policy, right, sir?
No, no,
We
we
don't.
yeah, we don't, obviously, for obvious reasons.
Um, my last question, very simple, plain, you could answer it in one line. Do you now, because there's war hysteria, the Indian media, news channels, the newsrooms have become war theaters. I don't know if you've witnessed some of that, but all of them are threatening Pakistan of an imminent war, and they keep using the word imminent, and I'm quoting them. Do you see kinetic action from India in the near future, or perhaps in the next few days?
Well, I have no independent information.
Right.
Uh, uh, I can only listen. I try not to watch these Indian news channels. Obviously, they are ridiculous. Um, but I believe that even our own defense minister has said that they expect that the Indians will do something. And I hope they do not, because obviously, if they do something, um, we will have to respond. and we will respond. And we've said we will respond. In the past, in 2019, when they tried that, we did respond. I think the escalation today could be more dangerous
Hmm.
because at that time um, we were in a more placatory mood
Hmm.
and returned the captured pilot and gave them a face saver. Um, this time, we don't know what kind of action they will take. If their action is to be credible for their own people, it will probably be more than what they did last time in sending a bomber to bomb our trees and kill crows. Uh, they would have to be more credible, and therefore our response would also be of a higher nature.
Hmm.
The chances of escalation would be much higher this time.
They
Uh,
bombed our they bombed our trees and we treated them to the same tea I'm drinking right now. But just one last thing, sir. Um, so you think our foreign minister Ishaq Dar on the day when all of this happened, we threatened them of suspending the Shimla agreement. I don't know what that meant, but and whether that was binding in any way. But one thing he said, and I recall he kept using the term Turki Baturki in Urdu. And so basically, he said that we will mimic India's response. It would be a tit for tat response. Um, how do you see this strategy of mimicking India's action? Do you think that Pakistan should do that? Or, I mean, it's a normative question. You could choose not to answer it, but
no,
yeah,
no, actually, our doctrine spells out what
right.
we will do. Our doctrine calls for a quid pro quo plus
Hmm.
response,
Yeah.
and which means that whatever they do, our response will be higher.
Hmm.
And whatever level that means. I mean, there are various levels at which they can take actions, and sub-conventional, conventional level, non-conventional level. But we are ready, and we have always been ready to respond at any level that they take action. It is a question of maintaining deterrence.
Hmm.
If they violate deterrence at any level, we will have to reestablish that deterrence by going a higher level.
Hmm.
So I think they should expect that. Our people should expect it, and the people of India should expect it. And therefore, it is my hope that the international community and the leadership in India will make a very sober assessment of the situation and refrain from the kind of threats that they've issued and refrain from taking any military action. Pakistan has offered cooperation, joint investigation, etc., etc. They should accept that. But if they think that they can coerce Pakistan by taking um, kinetic action, I think it would be a grave mistake.
Thank you so much, sir. We've gotten to the end of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Munir Akram was with us today. I would like to thank him for taking out the time. I would also like to thank my colleague and friend Umar Sheikh for connecting me, my friend in New York who connected me to him. Asad Butt signing off on New Wave Global.